Okay, so as promised, let's create the controller class, which seems to be a really important one for the entire, this is like a entry point for the user to manage, right? So I'm going to just say create simply a brand new Java class, right? This is a normal Java class. It has nothing to do with user interface. It's just a normal Java class, right? So we're just going to use the wizard. Naturally, we're going to call it a controller. In English, it's tempting to say demo controller. But in reality, in software, I usually flip these words by saying controller demo, right? Because in the future, I want to keep all of the classes that are controllers naturally next to one another. So the next controller I can call controller simulation, controller configuration, controller, you name it, right? Convert to something else. So all the controllers will be having controller word as a first word in their name. So controller demo, but when I think about it in my head, I more likely pronounce it as demo controller, which is much more natural for us to say. Okay. All right, so this is the controller. So this controller is responsible for essentially holding the window, right? So I definitely, you see how I name my window frame main window, so it's very likely that it needs frame main window to be the window, right? So I'll just call it the window, right? I could call it a frame, but or frame main window. Frame main window, Oh, frame main view, I apologize. Frame main view, that's what the name is. The name of the class, right? And of course in Java you want to say that this is perhaps private, right? Private member of your class, simply a reference to the window. Something that makes connection between the controller and the window. Once the controller has the window reference, it can then naturally invoke the methods that we want inside the window. All right, next thing, we definitely need public constructor, right? Public constructor. And public constructor, I don't know, we'll decide what it needs, right? Right now, controller demo, I'll just keep it empty for now, right? So, my habits are to say these are the this is the data, right? The data. Over here we can say these are constructors that help us to initially configure the instance of this controller demo. And typically I say constructors because I may decide to have different constructors with different parameters to have different ways to construct my object, right? So this is controller demo. Constructor method, and finally the operations. I will say here public void, which means doesn't return anything back, but we're going to say initialize. How about just init? Init is a good abbreviation. Init use case, right? So a method that basically initializes the use case. Okay. So it's like, for example, constructing business objects, right? As an example of what should be happening here. I will also utilize the fact that I have all these fancy wizard inside the this NetBeans environment, right? So I'll just actually get rid of those Java docs right now because I want to keep the everything in view as much as possible, right? So most likely we want to have a getter and setter for the window. Remember, I want to decouple creation of the controller from creation of the window. I should be able to create the controller and say, hey, wait for some time. When I have the window for you, I'll give you the window. So very likely that what I'm going to do is right click and say insert code, right? So for lazy people, this is really good. And we can say generate what? Perhaps getters and setters. And I'm going to check mark and say I want this window thing to be accessible by getters and setters. So although it gets inserted somewhere right next to where I was in my editor, I typically do move these getters and setters like Control X and Control V over to the operations section of my class, right? So if you're really good, you can basically add some more of the decorate your source code with like better comments to make everything look nice and so forth, right? So but that's the basic structure of the controller right now. Right, and also recall that I also, if I switch back to the design view on my frame, I have this move elevator thing. So it's very likely that when someone clicks that button, it's simply all the button is going to do is just simply call the controller and say move elevator. Okay, right there. So what I'm going to do is just say public, another public method, public void move elevator. Well, of course, there could be multiple elevators. We don't know which elevator right now, but we're just trying to build something to have some a little bit of some meaningful demo code. So right now, just no parameters, move elevator. Perhaps we have just one working elevator or something like that, right? So anticipating that that's what the button needs, that's fine, right? Okay, so this is good. On the other hand, should window have access to the controller? Of course, right? A window wants to communicate to all kinds of stuff within this running use case and instance of using the system. So naturally, the window definitely has to have access to the controller. So going back to the frame window here, right, and switching back to the source code, again, perhaps we can scroll. Let me just scroll up to what we have. Again, I can, any area which is not grayed out is available for me to use and add my own code. So I can add some more data here, and I can now say controller demo, and the suffix demo begins to irritate me a little bit because I really don't want this to be a demo. I kind of like in the mood to program some real thing, but we're just doing the demo, so it's just a little, so it's a silly name. It's not realistic very much. Should we keep it private for now? Of course, why not? All the data naturally should, the intent is to have all the data private, right? So we'll just simply call it controller. Right? So in the controller, we say, controller, you have the window. In the window, we say, window, you have the controller. Right? Now, interestingly, the constructor that we have here does appear to be in this non-grayed area. So maybe I can simply say that when I construct the window, maybe I already have the controller. So I can say controller and add it as a parameter. It's called controller demo, right? Not the controller. Controller demo, controller. Right, controller. And say that when the window is constructed, let's pass the reference to the existing controller object to the constructor so that the constructor can basically store it in the member of our window class. So right here again, in any non-grayed area, I can just say this dot controller equals controller. All right. So then the constructor will be expecting the controller, the reference to the controller, and it will take the reference to the controller and store it inside the object. Now, just to be sure that we're sort of like all on the same page, we're just saying that this, I did not have controller on this view, so I'm just about to add it, right? So when we construct, when we actually construct this window, which is an object of type that main view, whatever, right? So it now has this controller reference, and as we execute the constructor, first intention is to create the controller, which will be sitting on this border line between the business model and the presentation layer, right? So what's going to happen is that first we're going to create the controller right here, instantiate this, and then take its address and pass to the constructor of the window. So the window basically will store the reference, and then the constructor will execute and will get out of the picture, right? It will basically be gone. Constructor will execute, but at the same time, the window now will have, right? And I'm just going to make it quite visible. The window has a reference to the controller, right? So the window, if it wants to, it can find the controller immediately because it has the window that references the controller in memory. So window knows where the controller is. At the same time, we do have a member here that says window inside the controller, and we have the getter and setter, so we can set. When we're ready, we will set, and so the controller actually knows where the window is. So they both reference to each other in memory, and so far that's the arrangement. So let's make sure it actually does happen, right? So let's make sure that it actually does happen. So what I need to do here is that, so notice that I modified the constructor for frame main view. If that's the case, I have to remember that in my main, I can no longer just say new frame main view. I have to provide the controller. So let's go back to create the controller. We're going to say controller demo equals new controller demo. And so far it has no parameters to construct, right? Controller demo, hopefully, I need to name it controller, something like that. Notice how boring my names are. As much as I can keep them boring, I'm not giving them fancy names. If I'm thinking about the same object, in every context where I'm trying to use it, I just name it controller. Controller, 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 right? So controller here, create new controller. Right, execute initialization of all required business objects. I sort of already have that method, right? That says what was the name for it? I'm just trying to find it. Initialize use case, init use case, right? That's what I'm trying to refer to. Init use case, very well, right? So it's supposed to do something purposeful. Let me see what's wrong with that. Public void init use case. Oh, looks good. It should be happy with it. Init use case. And then, of course, this controller, I will have to pass to the main view, right? Pass the object to the main view constructor and set it visible. So let's see what happens here. Make sure that everything is in place. And then to make it more realistic, let's go back to the button. Right now, the button manipulates the text and says click, right? But in reality, instead of doing this stuff right here, right? Instead of doing this stuff, what it should do, instead, it should. Just trying to find where I am here. Yeah, this editor really doesn't let me do a lot. So here I will say controller, because controller is now part of my window, right? And I say controller move elevator, right? Because the button says move elevator. We just simply delegate this work to controller move elevator. And again, for the sake of demo, because I don't have any business objects just yet, that would be our next stage for building this up. I will move this code from here, Control X. Where is it? Control X like this, right? Go to the controller, and just for the sake of demonstration, place it inside move elevator, right? So of course, display area display elevators is basically the gadget which belongs to the window, but luckily I do have the window here, right? So I will say window. Oops. Just type it in, window, window area. So now I have to refer to the window. Again, this is a little demonstration piece, so at least we can show that the button doesn't do anything directly, but calls the controller, and the controller somehow decides that it needs to update this area, right? So this is so far what I have done with the controller and the view, and I think the only thing that's missing, which I still need, is to make sure that controller has the window. So once I create frame main view, I can do something like this. Once again, frame new temporary variable equals frame view blah blah blah, something like that. Temp. How about not temp, but actually main windows, something more specific. A main window equals new frame view, and it takes the controller so that it can remember the controller. Then we say just switch over here, right? Then we say controller take the window reference, which is set window, right? And it will take this reference to the window to remember where the window is, and eventually we can say main window set visible, right? So we don't have to stick with just the code that was generated for us. We're just trying to program it the way we wanted to have. So let's validate our comments. Usually the comments get out of sync with the real code. So let's see what we say. Create controller object, this is fine. Execute initialization, this is fine in its use case. Then we switch over to later do what? Create the window, yes, we do that. Let controller know what I don't like this comment. Let controller know the window object, something more specific, right? That's what we do right here, set window. And eventually we're visualizing the window, right? So more or less okay. So let's just make sure that it kind of like all runs as expected, right? So hopefully, if not too many, let's cancel and find out what it doesn't like. Clean and build, I'm suspecting that, yes. The problem is that what I tried to do here, right, I tried to say, when I say move elevator, and now I moved it over to the controller demo, right, it says area, it wants to access the area, but the area is kept private within the window, right, by design. You can see that all of these gadgets I have so far on my window are private. So they're not accessible outside of this window. So I better go and maybe add some getters and setters. So let me do this.